There is certainly a case in Sixes lacrosse for the old adage, the best defense is a good offense, especially when you consider the 23-9 drubbing Canada put on the US in the gold medal game of 2022 at the World Sixes Lacrosse Championship. However, the old saying, defense wins championships, also checks out for me, combined with elite defense to offense transition, which was the secret sauce in the Canadian blowout in Alabama. Defense starts as soon as you lose the ball, and there were many times, including after a goal or a missed shot in a settled offense or on a power play, where Canada and the US went into a two-player or full-field press depending on the situation. It was seemingly very effective when they did, as both teams were barely able to get off a shot by the time they got to the offensive end. The US threw out the first press 2 minutes into the first quarter after a Dobson save, and it resulted in a turnover on Challen Rogers, although the Canadian coaches were able to call a timeout, recognizing he was in trouble. Canada threw out the next press a minute later after Cole missed the net on a 5-on-5 shot. It took the USA 15 seconds to clear half and ended up with no time on offense and a turnover, with the American player having no option but to try to get it to the net 1-on-2 with under 5 in the shot clock. All three 5-on-5 pressure situations resulted in turnovers, with Canada not allowing a shot on 3 out of the 4 power play pressures that they ran, and the US not allowing a shot on 1 out of the 2. Both shots allowed were shorthanded goals that should have been saves in my opinion. In saying that, most of the time Canada laid off the press and instinctively got back to defense, covering reverse transition, which is their primary responsibility, and relying on their top-notch defense and goaltending. The best defenses start and end with quality goaltending, and Canada had no shortage of that at this tournament, with 60% save percentage, a 6 goal per game average. 2023 PLL Championship MVP Brett Dobson stood on his head. Quality goaltending is then reinforced with good foot and body positioning by the players in front of the goalie. On-ball positioning should be a few steps back to the middle with the hips parallel to the sidelines, in line with the offender's top shoulder and between their stick and the net. The on-ball defender needs to stand in the shooting lane, willing to block a shot and trying to keep the shot in front of him, not behind him, i.e. no screenshots and no screening the goalie.
We have fucking 2 guys running headfirst at shots. No one else in the world does that.
Wait till I see
That's
full
awesome.
speed. Power, baby. Oh yeah, crank it up too far.
This is all within the framework of what's historically known as a helping man-to-man or player-to-player in gender-neutral terms. The key is to know when to go and when to show in terms of helping. Off-ball defenders should position themselves further away from their check, ready to help in the prime scoring area and staying tight as a unit. Off-ball and adjacent or same-side defenders need to sag over and show help, but also be able to recover to their check if necessary. If a team gets beat towards the net, then the closest defender should slide over and help out, with all other defenders helping the helper if need be. The thought is that the offense has to beat all 5 defenders in order to score a goal. Another analogy would be that you need to cover 1.5 players at all time, your check and half of someone else's. The ultimate goal is not to get scored on. Defending just your check isn't good enough. Once you've made the defensive stop and scooped up the loose ball, players should then run up the field at full speed and push the ball up to any players ahead of them if possible. For the remainder of this blog, I will break down 10 defensive shifts from the first quarter which were indicative of the outcome of the game. In this first one, Canada is a bit too spread for my liking, much further out than they would be in traditional box lacrosse. Number 77 Courier does a good job of recognizing the situation, but unfortunately closes the gap on Heacock's low shoulder when he slides, allowing him to get topside. If number 2 Heacock steps into this one instead of doing the jump shot, he would have gotten closer to the net and might have scored, and the stats show that if it was a bounce shot, it had a high likelihood of going in. Courier, knowing that he was already beat, just took off cheating or leaking, as we would say, and it paid off because number 22 Conrad was sleeping on the far side and didn't do his job off ball high, which is to cover the reverse transition. In general, the rule in box lacrosse is that the highest player on the off ball should be covering the reverse transition if there's a shot from the opposite side of the field. If the goalie makes the save and secures the rebound, both high players on offense should get back and not let anyone behind them. On a shot where there's a rebound and a 50-50 loose ball on the same side as the shooter, or a turnover on the ball side, the off-ball high player should be getting back on defense, and the on-ball high player needs to decide whether to attack the rebound or also get back, depending on the situation. On a shot where there's a rebound and a 50-50 loose ball on the opposite side as the shooter, the off-ball high player has to either attack the loose ball or get back, depending on the situation. The shooter should also be getting back. In defensive set number 2, Byrne, number 22, was low and stayed tucked in this time, which ultimately worked out better than being pushed out like in the last clip. The Americans liked to swing it once around and attack from the opposite shooter position, which was a common thread for most of the game. Again, we have another good show of help by Courier, which forces number 26 Schreiber to turn back and basically take an alley shot on his non-dominant hand, which is a win every time for the defense. As motion develops with the ball movement, defenders need to arrive at a check in control, never overcommitting or overchecking while keeping balanced. As the opponent gets closer to a threatening scoring area, the defender should be shadowing them backward towards the goal. On the third defensive set for Canada, they should have switched before the alley dodge. Byrne, number 22, tries to recover. Berg, number 14, slides upfield, and it ends up being a save, with 3 Americans caught low for a 2-on-1 turned partial breakaway for Zach Courier, who makes no mistake for his second breakaway goal in the first 2 minutes of the game. Canada ends up taking a timeout their next possession, and here is a clip of McCardle in the huddle for the USA talking about needing to get back and cover the hole.
You guys are doing great, yes. Hey, if we're dodging and we're on the crease, we see him going down the alley, the guy off the crease, high guy, need to get back. Yes. All right, we got to get back and cover the hole. He's looking right up. All right, make sure we take away that transition off.
The general team rule in a helping player-to-player defense is that the high defenders should always deny offensive players from getting over the top side. The low defenders denying getting beaten underneath. In this next clip, Canada is still pressed out quite a bit low, with lots of Canadian defenders with their heads on a swivel looking to help. You can tell the Canadians are communicating defensively, as this is the classic high-low switch. Number 42 Peterson is telling number 23 Rogers that he's got low, so that when number 3 Tierney drives underneath, Rogers just does an inside roll back into the hole, maintaining his high responsibilities. Peterson continues to lunge out a bit. I'd like to see him sit back on his underneath responsibilities, as he almost got beat here, but ends up coming up with the classic low to high trail check in the end. Switching over to the US defense, after a first feeling out tight possession that ended up in a turnover for Canada, here's the second defensive shift by the USA, where you have the Americans not doing the high-low switch properly. 2 guys end up jumping out at the ball, resulting in the defense having to slide or rotate to recover, which ultimately throws the defense off balance and leads to a quality topside sweep shot by Courier. This empty crease high post setup on the weak side by the Canadians would end up being the death of the USA defense. They simply had no answer, wanting to instinctively stay on everything instead of instinctively switching on everything like the Canadian help defense. The communication between the defenders should be to stay if it's a bad situation to switch. Otherwise, as communication breaks down with fatigue and other factors, the natural inclination should be for the defender to switch, not stay. Here it is again on the very next possession, both American defenders jumping out at the ball carrier off of an east-west dodge on a pick. You need to be ready to switch anytime there is contact on a pick, which I don't believe was an established rule on this defense. Beyond all else, communication amongst defenders for picks coming, when to stay on a check, and when to switch checks is the key to successful team defense. Here we have a great initial setup by the American defenders in the wall, with each defender a step down and in from the defender in front of them. Consequently, the high defender number 3, Tierney, tries to stay on Teat as he runs down the side instead of passing him down to the defenders below him in the wall and maintaining his high responsibilities. Number 26, Schreiber, is the low defender whose actual responsibility it is to be there to cut off an underneath crease dive from Teat. Instead, it's in the back of the net because nobody knows their job. The Americans simply aren't used to playing 5-on-5 with the short stick D. This is actually great defensive positioning by the Americans, less one unnecessary slide towards the end. Here the on-ball defender, Kirst, is by himself and has perfect footwork, angling his feet to invite Bjorn over top where he has help. The ball then gets swung to the righties, where the two defenders are in a wall, with the low defender a little bit further out than I'd like, denying top side using their footwork, and the threat of pushing their check into the crease if they try to go underneath. For some unknown reason, the high defender, Tierney, slides down with an aggressive adjacent slide, and considering the low defender Tevlin did their job perfectly, which this high defender needs to trust, he should only be providing topside support, not underneath support. A great second slide puts pressure on a wide open Clark Peterson, but there's no third slide ready, and unfortunately Peterson handcuffs number 24 McIntosh with the pass. Here again we have an empty crease setup on the weak side. The low American defender is not doing his underneath responsibility properly. In this case, the low defender, number 12, needs to show help underneath and split between his check and his help responsibilities. Elsewise, he needs to tell number 26 Schreiber that he's alone, or ISO, in which case Schreiber needs to deny the underneath lane by angling his feet on a 45-degree angle, like in the beginning of the last clip, and forcing his check back over top where there's help. There was a big trend for players getting beat underneath late in quarters. Lastly, a classic to do with not communicating well, number 8 on the American defense, Adam Gittleman, who's actually a backup goalie, literally had no idea who he had this whole shift. Number 51 Teat is just sitting there completely uncovered the whole time. This is the type of stuff that happens late in quarters when guys are tired. One skip pass ends up being enough to force all of the defenders to slide, and Byrne buries a set shot 5-hole with authority. 5-hole seemed to be a very high percentage shot in this game, which is something I will break down in our next blog on offense. So what's the tale of the tape? Speaking to just the first quarter, Team USA did not have a single fast break or odd player break the whole quarter. 5-on-4, 4-on-3, nothing, and in fact they only had one the entire game. There's also no excuse for not knowing your responsibilities for covering against an opponent's fast break, which was very evident at the previous year's Super Sixes tournament. A 2-on-2 in the open field is like a 2-on-1 in box lacrosse, in terms of the type of quality shot you should get in that scenario. Outside of transition goals, Canada scored about half of their remaining goals over top and half underneath in terms of goal distribution, whereas the US seemed to favor the underneath action. 3 players got beat for goals underneath on 3 attempts in the first quarter between 5:20 and 1:45 left in the quarter. 3 guys got beat underneath in a row late in the third quarter, 2 of them for goals between the 2:13 and 1:08 mark. The final key to the Canadian success was their ability to get to the middle and get crease walks right in front of the net, while also keeping Team USA out of the middle, which is something I will give you more of a visual on in the next Sixes blog on offense. Aside from how goals were scored, I would also love to know how many goals certain players cost their team defensively. However, that would just be beating a dead horse at this point. It would also be interesting to know who is covering the most ground out there in terms of how far and how fast they're running, which is something that I'll also look at in the Science of Sixes blog. Bottom line is, whatever you're doing out there, you're best to err on the side of defense and always be thinking defense first. Also be able to push the reset button quickly, as there's little time to reset mentally in Sixes, and the next play is literally already happening before it even begins.
It's a great D possession. Stop, boys.